Asterisk space was dark and silent. Commander Armin Reed floated inside his damaged ship. Red warning lights blinked around him. Smoke filled the air. His ship had escaped a pirate attack, but it was badly hit. Emergency landing required. The system voice repeated. Armin looked at the screen. There was only one nearby planet. It was small, unknown, not even marked on most star maps. He had no other choice. The ship entered the planet's atmosphere. Fire burned around it. The engine screamed. Armin held tight as the ship crashed into a forest of glowing blue trees. Everything went black. When Armin opened his eyes, it was quiet again. He slowly stood up. His armor was damaged, but he was alive. He stepped outside the broken ship and looked around. The forest was beautiful. The trees were thin and tall. The leaves shined like soft lights. Strange birds flew above him. Then he heard something. Tiny. Voices. Very small. Very fast. He looked down. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Small figures were running between the grass. They were no taller than his hand. Little people. Armin knelt down slowly. He removed his helmet. The tiny beings froze. There were at least 20 of them. They looked humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs. Big glowing eyes. Soft silver skin. They wore small suits that looked advanced. One of them stepped forward. He was shaking. Armin spoke softly. I will not hurt you. They did not understand his language, but his calm voice made them less afraid. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground. Armin turned his head toward the sky. 3 black ships appeared above the forest. Pirates. The same pirates who attacked him. They followed me. Armin whispered. The tiny aliens began to panic. They ran in different directions. Some screamed. Some tried to hide under leaves. The pirate ships landed roughly. Large armored soldiers jumped out. They were laughing. One pirate grabbed the tiny alien between his fingers. Look at these little things, he shouted. Another pirate kicked down one of their small buildings. It broke like paper. Armin's eyes grew cold. He could leave. He could hide in the forest. The pirates were not here for him anymore. But when he looked down, he saw something that stopped him. A tiny alien child was trying to pull her mother away from a pirate's boot. She was too small. Too weak. Armin stood up. Slowly, he activated his suit. Power returned to his armor. Not full power, but enough. He stepped out from the trees. The ground shook under his boots. The pirates turned. One of them laughed. Oh look, the human survived. Another pirate lifted his weapon. We finish him now. Armin did not speak. He fired first. His plasma rifle hit the pirate's armor. The pirate flew backward and crashed into a tree. The tiny aliens froze. The pirates shouted in anger. The forest became a battlefield. Blaster. Shots burned through trees. Smoke filled the air. Armin moved fast. Even injured, he was stronger and bigger than the pirates. One pirate tried to attack him from behind. Tiny alien suddenly pressed something on a small device. The ground under the pirate exploded. Armin noticed they were small, but they were not helpless. 2 pirates remained. They tried to run back to their ship. Armin jumped forward and blocked them. You picked the wrong planet, he said calmly. Within minutes, it was over. The last pirate ship escaped into space. Silence returned to forest. Armin stood still, breathing heavily. Then he felt something touch his boot. He looked down. The tiny alien child was standing there. She was not afraid anymore. She placed her tiny hand on his armor. More of them came out from hiding. Slowly. Carefully. They surrounded him. Not with fear, but with wonder. One of them stepped forward. He looked older. His suit was decorated with golden lines. He bowed. Armin did not understand their words, but he understood that meaning. Gratitude. Respect. The small alien leader pressed a button on his wrist. Soft blue light scanned Armin. Then a clear voice came. From a tiny device. Great giant. You defended our people. The voice was broken, but understandable. Armin blinked in surprise. You have translation tech? The small leader nodded. You risked your life for us. We are the Lumians. Armin looked around at the tiny broken city. You need better defenses, he said. The Lumian leader's eyes glowed softly. Our chief must meet you, he said. Armin sighed. His ship was destroyed. He had nowhere to go. All right, he answered. As they walked toward the glowing city. Armin did not know something important. The Lumians had ancient laws, ancient traditions. And when someone saves their entire civilization, they must be honored in the highest way possible. Armin thought he had just survived another battle. He did not know his life was about to become much more complicated and much more unexpected. Armin had fought many battles in space. He had seen large cities. He had seen powerful alien empires, but he had never walked inside a world that could fit under his boots. The Lumians led him deeper into their city. At first, he thought it was only small houses in the forest. He was wrong. The ground suddenly opened. Armin stopped. The Lumians pressed a hidden device, and a large platform slowly lifted from the earth. It was big enough for him to stand on. The small leader looked up at him. Please, giant protector. Armin stepped onto the platform carefully. It moved down. Slowly. Quietly. The forest floor closed above him. And then he saw it. An entire underground city. Bright crystal towers, flying mini vehicles. Energy, bridges made of light, thousands of tiny Lumians moving around. Everything small. Everything perfect. Armin's eyes widened. This is incredible, he whispered. The Lumians were not primitive. They were advanced. Very advanced. Their technology was clean and silent. Their city was organized. Their systems were powerful, but their bodies were small, too small to fight larger species. As the platform reached the bottom, many Lumians gathered around. They stared at Armin like he was a giant from a storybook. Some looked amazed, some looked emotional, some bowed. The small leader raised his hand. The crowd became silent. This is the human, he announced through city speakers. The one who stood against the sky demons. Armin understood only some words through the translator, but he understood their eyes. Hope. For the first time, these tiny beings believed they could survive. They guided Armin through glowing streets. Buildings were built inside crystal walls. Energy flowed through the ground like rivers of light. He saw tiny factories building micro-machines. He saw scientists working with floating screens. He saw children watching him from windows. He felt strange. He was used to being a soldier. Feared. Avoided. But here, he was something else. A protector. Finally, they reached the center of the city. A tall crystal tower stood there. It was taller than any building around it. The doors opened. Inside, guards stood in silver armor. In the center of the hall sat an older Lumian on a floating throne. His suit was white and gold. His eyes glowed brighter than the others. The small leader bowed deeply. Our chief, he said. Armin lowered his head slightly in respect. The chief studied him quietly for a long moment. No one spoke. Then the chief activated a stronger translator. His voice became clear. You are larger than our legends described. Armin blinked. Legends? The chief's eyes softened. Yes, long ago, our ancestors spoke of giants. Tall warriors who defended the weak. Armin crossed his arms. Humans are not legends. We are just people. The chief shook his head. Slowly, you had no reason to fight for us. Armin looked serious. I did have a reason. The hall became silent. What reason? The chief asked. Armin's voice was calm. Because it was right. The Lumians looked at each other. They did not understand that answer fully. For them, actions always came with gain. Trade. Alliance. Reward. But this human fought without asking for anything. That made him different. that made him dangerous. Or sacred. Suddenly, an alarm echoed in the hall. A scientist rushed forward. He looked terrified. "Chief, the pirates have sent a signal." Armin's jaw tightened. "They are calling reinforcements." The scientist continued. "They will return with larger ships." Fear spread through the hall. The Lumians were intelligent, but they were small. Even one pirate ship could destroy their surface. A full fleet would end them. The chief looked at Armin. "You have seen our city," he said quietly. "You understand now why we cannot survive open war." Armin thought for a moment. He looked at the tiny guards. Their armor was advanced, but they were barely taller than his boots. He exhaled slowly. "How long do we have?" he asked. "2 planetary rotations," the scientist answered. "About 48 hours. Not much time." The chief floated down from his throne. He came closer to Armin. "Very close." "We cannot repay you with simple gifts," the chief said. "Our laws are ancient. When someone saves our entire civilization—" He paused. The entire hall waited. "We must honor them in the highest way possible." Armin frowned slightly. "I don't need a reward." The chief's eyes glowed brighter. "It is not optional." The room became very quiet. Armin felt something shift in the air. Something serious, something cultural, something he did not yet understand. The chief raised his hand. "Prepare the bond ceremony." The words echoed across the crystal walls. The Lumians gasped softly. Armin looked confused. "Bond ceremony?" he repeated, but no one answered him. Instead, the guards stepped forward respectfully, and somewhere in the city, a young Lumian female was being prepared. Armin had fought pirates. He had survived space battles, but he was not ready for what the Lumians believed was the greatest honor of all. The entire Lumian city was glowing brighter than before. Soft blue lights flowed through the crystal walls. Energy. Bridges shined like stars. Music echoed through the underground halls. "Commander." Armin stood in the center of the grand chamber. He still did not fully understand what was happening. The words, "bond ceremony," repeated in his mind. He had asked 3 times what it meant. Each time, the Lumians only said one thing: "It is our highest honor." That did not make him feel better. Hundreds of Lumians filled the chamber. Guards stood in perfect lines. Scientists paused their work to watch. Children sat on crystal steps, whispering. At the far end of the hall, the chief floated above the ground, wearing white and gold armor. Armin felt very large. Too large. One wrong step could break something important. He crossed his arms and spoke quietly to the chief. "I respect your culture, but I don't need a reward." The chief looked calm. "This is not a reward," he said. "It is balance." Armin frowned. The chief nodded slowly. "When someone gives their life for our people, we must give life in return." Armin did not like how that sounded. Before he could ask more questions, the lights dimmed. The music changed. The large crystal doors at the back of the hall slowly opened, and the entire city became silent. Small figure walked inside. She was different. Her suit was not silver like the others. It was soft blue with glowing white lines. Her hair shimmered like liquid light. Her eyes were calm. Not afraid, not nervous. Confident. She walked forward slowly, each step careful, each movement graceful. Armin watched in confusion. The translator in his suit activated. Automatically, the chief's voice echoed across the chamber. "Commander Armin, Reed of Earth, you defended our world without demand. You stood against death for those smaller than you." The chief raised his hand toward the small female. "This is Lyra Vale." Armin looked down at her. She was barely taller than his boot, but she did not look weak. She stopped in front of him. Then she bowed deeply. The chief continued. "According to Lumian law, when a giant protector saves our civilization, he must never stand alone again." Armin's eyes widened slightly. The chief's voice became stronger. "We assign to you a life bond partner. The words echoed loudly. The chamber glowed brighter. Armin blinked. I'm sorry, what? The translator repeated clearly. Life. Bond. Partner. The small female Lyra lifted her head. She looked directly into Armin's eyes. Her voice came through the translator. From this moment, my life path joins yours. Armin froze. His soldier mind tried to understand the situation. Marriage? Adoption? Political alliance? He shook his head quickly. Wait, no, there is some mistake. A soft murmur spread across the crowd. The chief looked surprised. Mistake? He asked. Yes, Armin said carefully. Humans do not accept people as gifts. Lyra's expression did not change. I am not a gift, she said calmly. Her voice was steady. I volunteered. That made the chamber whisper louder. Armin stared at her. You volunteered? She nodded once. Our history speaks of giants. Protectors who walk alone. Warriors who carry heavy burdens. Her small hand gently touched her chest. I am a xenoscience specialist. I study larger species. I understand your biology, your psychology, your war patterns. Armin felt more confused by the second. So this is research? The chief shook his head. It is partnership. Lyra stepped closer, very close. Life bond means we stand equal, she explained. I support your path. You protect mine. Our futures connect. Armin looked around the hall. No one was joking. No. One was smiling. This was serious. Very serious. He crouched down slowly so he was closer to her level. You don't even know me, he said quietly. Lyra's glowing eyes held his. You protected children you never met, she replied. Silence filled the chamber. Armin had no quick answer for that. The chief floated closer. If you reject this honor, he said carefully, our laws will see it as rejection of our unity. Armin looked up sharply. That is not my intention. We know, the chief replied. But tradition is ancient. Armin ran a hand over his face. 48 hours until pirates return. His ship destroyed, now assigned a alien partner. His life had officially become strange. Very strange. Lyra spoke again. You may refuse me, she said calmly. But know this. I chose this path because I believe you are more than a soldier. Her words hit differently. Not political. Not forced. Personal. Armin stood up slowly. The entire city waited for his answer. He looked at the tiny scientist in front of him. Brave. Calm. Not afraid of a giant human. Finally he exhaled. I do not understand your customs fully, he said carefully, but I will not insult your honor. The chamber glowed warmly. The chief raised his staff. The bond is recognized. Soft energy lights surrounded Armin and Lyra. For a moment it felt warm. Not controlling. Not binding. Just symbolic. But before the moment could settle, Shan alarms screamed through the city. Red lights flashed across the crystal walls. A scientist rushed inside, panicking. Chief. Long-range scanners detect 5 pirate warships entering orbit. The chamber froze. 5 ships. Not 1. Not 2. An invasion. The chief turned slowly toward Armin, giant protector. It seems your bond begins in war. Armin looked down at Lyra. She did not look afraid. She looked ready. Armin gave a small, serious nod. Then we don't have much time. Above them, the sky darkened. And this time the pirates were not coming to capture. They were coming to destroy. The sky above the planet was no longer peaceful. 5 pirate warships floated in orbit. Dark. Silent. Waiting. Inside the underground Lumion city. Red warning lights flashed across the crystal walls. The bond ceremony had ended only minutes ago. Now war stood at their door. Commander Arman stood in the grand chamber, looking at a large hologram of space above them. 5 massive ships. Each one powerful enough to destroy cities. The Lumions were advanced, but they were small. Their ships were small. Their weapons were small, and their enemy was not. Lyra stood on a floating platform beside him. She was calm, too calm. Armin looked down at her. You understand this is going to be dangerous, right? He asked. She looked up at him. Yes, she answered simply. You can still cancel this bond, Armin said quietly. You don't have to stay connected to a human soldier about to enter a war. Lyra tilted her head slightly. In Lumian culture, she said, a life bond is not a decoration. It is responsibility. Armin sighed. This is exactly what I was afraid of. She studied him carefully. You fear controlling me, she said. I fear losing more people, Armin corrected. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two different species, two different sizes, but standing on the same side. The chief entered the strategy chamber. Our surface shields will not survive a full bombardment, he said. A scientist added, our fleet is too small to fight in open space. Armin crossed his arms. Then we don't fight in open space. All Lumians turned toward him. Lyra's eyes glowed with interest. You have a strategy? She asked. Armin nodded slowly. Pirates are aggressive, overconfident. They think you are weak. The chief's voice was calm. We are physically weak. Yes, Armin agreed, but not mentally. He looked at Lyra. How fast can your engineers build micro-explosives? Her expression changed slightly. Focused, serious, double quotes, very fast, she answered. But scale difference is a problem. Armin knelt down so he was closer to her level. Not if we think differently. He pointed at the hologram of the pirate ships. You don't attack the ship. You attack what is inside. The scientists, murmured. Lyra understood first. You mean infiltration, she said. Armin nodded. They won't expect tiny soldiers inside their systems. The room became quiet. The idea was dangerous, very dangerous. The chief looked uncertain. If we fail, they will erase us. Armin's voice became firm. If you do nothing, they erase you anyway. Silence. Heavy silence. Finally, the chief raised his hand. Prepare infiltration teams. The city moved instantly. Lumians ran to engineering labs. Weapons were prepared. Micro ships powered up. Lyra turned to Armin. You will fight on the surface? She asked. Yes, he replied. You will distract them. He gave a small smile. That's what humans do best. Hours passed quickly. The pirate ships began scanning the planet. A loud voice echoed from orbit. Tiny creatures below. You destroyed our men. Now you will pay. The message ended with laughter. Armin stood on the forest surface near his crashed ship. The blue trees moved softly in the wind. His armor was repaired as much as possible. Not perfect, but ready. Below him, hidden in the ground, hundreds of tiny Lumian infiltration pods waited. Lyra stood beside his boot. She looked up at him. If you die, she said calmly, our bond transfers to memory record. Armin looked down at her. That's not very comforting. It is logical, she replied. He shook his head slightly. You're different from most people I know. She studied him again. And you are different from the giants in our old stories. A loud explosion interrupted them. Pirate dropships entered the atmosphere. Fire burned across the sky. The invasion had begun. Armin activated his helmet. Stay safe, he said quietly. Lyra placed her tiny hand on his armor again. Return alive, she answered. Then she stepped back as hidden platforms lowered her. Underground. The ground closed. Armin stood alone on the surface. The first pirate dropship crashed into the forest. Large, armored soldiers jumped out. Blasters ready, they saw him immediately. One pirate laughed loudly. The human again. Armin lifted his plasma rifle. Yes, he said calmly. But this time, I'm not alone. The pirates charged. Blaster fire filled the forest. Armin fired back. Trees exploded. Smoke filled the air. Above, pirate warships prepared orbital cannons. But deep inside their ships, Something unexpected happened. Tiny metal pods, silently attached to their hulls, small enough to avoid scanners. Inside those pods, Lumian infiltration teams of and leading the central command. Underground Lyra. Watching, calculating, preparing to strike. On the surface, Armin took a direct hit. He fell to one knee. A pirate raised his weapon to finish him. But suddenly, the pirate's armor shut down. His weapon powered off. Confusion spread among the invaders. Inside their ships, lights flickered. Systems failed. Doors locked. Engines glitched. The Lumians were inside. The battle had just changed. Armin slowly stood back up, even injured. He smiled behind his helmet. The pirates had expected small victims. They did not expect a giant distraction. And a civilization that refused to stay weak. And far below, Lyra whispered one calm sentence. Bond partner, Phase 2 is ready. The forest was burning. Blue trees fell one by one. Smoke covered the sky. Commander Armin stood in the middle of chaos. His armor was cracked. His left arm system was damaged. Warning signs flashed inside his helmet, but he was still standing. Around him, pirate soldiers shouted in confusion. Their weapons failed without warning. Their armor shut down for seconds at a time. That was all Armin needed. He moved forward like a storm. Precise. Fast. Deadly. Above the planet, one pirate warship suddenly lost power. Its engines flickered. Inside the ship, tiny Lumian teams ran through metal walls using magnetic boots. They were small enough to move inside. Air vents. Small enough to hide inside wiring systems. Small enough to be invisible and leading the entire operation. Lyra. She stood in the Lumian command chamber underground. Holographic screens floated around her. Her eyes moved quickly. Calm. Focused. Disable navigation on Ship 3. She ordered. Tiny engineers followed her commands instantly. She was no longer just a scientist. She was a war strategist. On the surface, Armin blocked a heavy strike from a pirate. Commander. This one was larger. Stronger. Wearing black armor with red marks. The pirate leader. You protect insects. The pirate growled. Armin wiped blood from his mouth inside the helmet. They are not insects. The pirate laughed. You fight for creatures that fit in your hand. Armin's voice became cold. Size does not decide value. The pirate attacked again. Harder. Faster. Armin was pushed back. His damaged armor struggled to keep up. A heavy blast hit his chest. He flew backward and crashed into a broken tree. His helmet screen cracked. Warning alarms screamed below ground. Lyra saw his life signs drop. Her hands froze for half a second. Just half a second. Then she forced herself to stay calm. Focus, she whispered to herself. Emotion could wait. War could not. Activate overload sequence on pirate armor frequency. She ordered. Engineers hesitated. That may burn our systems too. Do it, Lyra said firmly. On the surface, the pirate leader walked slowly toward Armin. You should have escaped when you had the chance. Armin tried to stand. His legs shook. His vision blurred. The pirate lifted his weapon for the final shot. Then the pirate's armor sparked violently. Electric energy exploded around him. He screamed in pain as his suit shut down completely. Armin looked confused for a second. Then he understood. Lyra. The pirate ripped off his damaged helmet. Furious. Now it was hand-to-hand combat. The pirate charged. Armin removed his own broken helmet. If this was the end, he would face it with open eyes. They collided like two meteors. Fists hit armor. Armor cracked. Blood touched the ground. The pirate was strong, but Armin had something different. Not just training, not just anger. Purpose. The pirate grabbed Armin by the throat. You will fall, he hissed. Armin struggled to breathe. Then he remembered something small. A tiny hand touching his boot. A calm voice saying, return alive. With a final burst of strength, Armin twisted free and drove his fist into the pirate's chest. Once, twice, three times. The pirate collapsed. Silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining pirates began retreating toward their ships. But above them, two pirate warships suddenly exploded in silent fire. Lumian sabotage had reached their cores. The sky lit up. The pirates panicked. Retreat orders were shouted. Within minutes, the surviving ships escaped into deep space. The invasion was over. For now. Our men dropped to one knee. The forest was quiet again. Burned, damaged, but standing. Below ground, the Lumian city erupted in relieved cheers. Lyra did not cheer. She watched Armin's weak life signs carefully. Prepare medical platform, she ordered. Surface access opened. A lift rose from the earth beside Armin. Tiny medical teams rushed toward him. He looked down weakly as small figures surrounded him. One of them climbed carefully onto his armored chest. Lyra. She looked at his injuries closely. You are inefficient at self-preservation, she said calmly. Armin gave a tired small smile. And you're very bossy for someone 12 inches tall. Her glowing eyes softened slightly. You almost died. He looked at her. So did your people. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something different. You fought not because of law, not because of bond. She placed her tiny hand over a cracked part of his armor. You fought because you chose to. Armin's voice was weak but steady. That's what partners do, right? For the first time Lyra smiled, a real one. Not logical. Not strategic, personal. Above them, the sky slowly cleared. But far away in deep space, inside a damaged pirate ship, a transmission was sent to the outer warlord. The Lumians are no longer defenseless. They have a human protector. The message ended, and somewhere in the darkness, something much more powerful heard it. The war was not over. It was only beginning. The Lumian city was quiet again. The fires on the surface were gone. The pirate ships had retreated, but no one was celebrating loudly. Because everyone felt it. Something bigger was coming. Commander Armin lay inside a special healing chamber. It was built for Lumian bodies. Small. Precise. But now it was adjusted to fit a human giant. Soft blue light moved over his wounds. Tiny medical drones repaired his armor piece by piece. He was awake, but resting. Lyra stood on a floating platform near his shoulder. Her hands moved across holographic screens, monitoring his heartbeat, his oxygen levels. His brain activity. You should rest, she said calmly. Armin looked at her with tired eyes. You don't rest. I will later, she replied. He gave a weak smile. You almost lost me out there. Her fingers paused for a second. Incorrect, she said softly. You almost lost yourself. He looked at her more carefully. You were worried. She did not answer immediately. Lumians were logical beings. Emotion was controlled, measured, but something inside her felt different now. I calculated your survival chances at 12%. She said quietly. That is inefficient. Armin chuckled softly. That's the nicest thing anyone ever said about me. For the first time, she did not respond with logic. She simply looked at him, and something changed between them. Not because of law, not because of tradition, because of choice. Hours later, the chief requested their presence. Armin walked slowly into the grand archive chamber. This room was older than the rest of the city. Ancient crystal walls. Strange symbols glowing faintly. The chief floated near a tall pillar of light. You have both proven something important, the chief said. Armin crossed his arms carefully. That pirates are stupid? The chief almost smiled. That we were wrong. The room became silent. Lyra looked up. Wrong about what? She asked. The chief activated the pillar. Ancient images appeared in the air. Old recordings. Old history. Thousands of years ago, large figures stood beside Lumia. Giants. Humans. Wearing old space armor, fighting unknown enemies. Armin stared at the images. That's impossible, he whispered. The chief's voice became serious. Our ancestors once worked beside your species. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. But human records do not show this, she said, because it was erased. The chief answered. The image changed. A massive war. Dark ships, entire planets burning. Long ago, a great enemy hunted smaller civilizations, the chief continued. Humans stood as shields. Armin felt something heavy in his chest. What happened? He asked. The chief lowered his eyes. The humans lost. Silence filled the chamber. Most of them died protecting others, the chief said. The survivors disappeared. Your history forgot us, and we hid. Armin looked at the ancient image again. Humans fighting. Standing tall. Protecting. It felt familiar. Too familiar, spoke softly. So our legends of giants were not myths. No, the chief replied. They were memories. The room grew darker as the image shifted again. A symbol appeared in the air. Strange. Sharp. Cold. This mark belongs to the outer warlord, the chief said. The one who led the ancient war. Armin felt a chill. We just fought pirates. He said. Yes, the chief answered. Pirates who now serve him. Silence. Heavy silence. The transmission sent from the damaged pirate ship. It was not random. It was a report. To something ancient. Something powerful. Lyra looked at Armin. If the outer warlord learns a human protects us. She did not finish the sentence. Armin did. He'll come himself. The chief nodded slowly. Shields cannot survive him. Armin looked at the ancient recordings again. Humans had once stood here, before him. They had failed. But they had fought. He took a slow breath. Then maybe it's time humans remember who they are, he said quietly. Lyra studied him carefully. You are only one human. Armin looked down at her. Not for long. The chief tilted his head slightly. What do you mean? Armin's eyes were no longer tired. They were focused. My ship may be destroyed, he said. But Earth is not. The meaning hit the room. Slowly. Alliance. Contact. War on a galactic scale. Lyra's voice was calm but softer than before. If you call Earth, this planet becomes a battlefield. Armin nodded. It already is. The crystal walls dimmed. Far above the planet. Deep in space, a massive shadow moved. Much larger than pirate ships. Much darker. Watching. Inside that shadow. Cold eyes studied new data. Human. Active. Protecting Lumians. A deep voice echoed in the darkness. So the giants return. Back in the chamber, Lyra stepped closer to Armin. Our bond began with ceremony, she said quietly, but it continues with choice. Armin looked at her. Are you ready for what comes next? Her glowing eyes did not shake. I chose you once, she said. I choose this again. Above them, the stars shifted. The ancient war was waking up, and this time humanity would not fight alone. The message was sent. A single signal. Compressed. Directed. Toward Earth. Commander Armin stood alone on the surface of the Lumian planet as the transmission left orbit. The night sky was calm, too. Calm. Beside his boot stood Lyra. She looked up at the stars. How long until your people answer? She asked. Armin's voice was steady. If they receive it. Not long. Below them, the Lumian city prepared for evacuation protocols. Children were moved to deep shelters. Energy cores were protected. Defense grids were pushed to maximum because the shadow in space was no longer hiding. It moved closer. Slow. Massive. Terrifying. The outer warlord had arrived. The warship was unlike anything. The outer warlord had arrived. Pirates had died. It was not just large. It was enormous. A floating fortress. Black. Metal covered in ancient scars. Red lights glowing like angry eyes. When it entered orbit, the sky itself seemed to darken. Inside the Lumian command chamber, silence filled the air. Even the chief looked smaller now. This is the one from our history, he whispered. Armin stared at the hologram. That's not a ship, he said quietly. That's a message. Lyra looked at him. What message? Armin's eyes hardened. Fear. A transmission came from the massive warship. The same deep voice echoed across the planet. Tiny civilization. You were permitted to survive in silence. The voice was cold. Ancient. But you called the giants back. Lyra felt something heavy in her chest. The voice continued. For that mistake, you will be erased. The transmission ended. Moments later, energy gathered at the bottom of the warship. A weapon charging, stronger than anything the pirates had. Lumion shields powered up, but everyone knew they would not survive a direct hit. Armin stepped forward. I'll take a shuttle, he said. Lyra turned quickly. That is suicide. Probably, he replied calmly. The chief looked at him with deep understanding. You cannot defeat that ship alone. Armin looked at the sky. I don't need to defeat it. He activated a small device on his armor, a locator beacon. If Earth is listening, he said quietly, they'll see this signal. The warship's weapon glowed brighter, seconds away from firing. Armin looked down at Lyra. This time, she did not speak logically. She did not calculate odds. She simply stepped onto his armored hand as he lowered it. Her tiny hand touched his finger. If this is the end, she said softly, I do not regret my choice. Armin felt something strong in his chest. Not duty, not war, connection. It's not the end, he said. Above them, the massive weapon fired. A beam of red energy shot toward the planet. The Lumion shields trembled. Cracks of light spread across the barrier. The ground shook. Lyra held onto Armin's armor. The beam pushed harder. The shields began to fail. Then, something impossible happened. Flash of white light tore through space. Right between the warship and the planet. The red beam split apart. Disappeared. Silence followed. Then dozens no doubt hundreds of human warships jumped out of hyperspace. Silver hulls. Blue engine trails. Formation perfect. Organized. Ready. The sky was no longer dark. It was filled with humanity. Inside the largest human ship, a calm voice transmitted across all channels. This is Earth Defense Fleet. The voice was strong, clear. We received your signal, Commander Reed. Armin closed his eyes for 1 second. Relief. Behind him, the Lumion city watched in disbelief. The human fleet continued. Unknown hostile vessel. You are threatening a protected civilization. A pause. Then the final words. Stand down. The Outer Warlord's massive ship rotated slowly. For the first time in thousands of years, Shit hesitated. The deep ancient voice answered, so the giants truly return. The human fleet powered weapons, but did not fire, because this was not just revenge. It was protection. Armin looked down at Lyra. She stared at the human fleet in awe. You did not exaggerate, she whispered. He gave a small smile. We're stubborn. The chief's voice echoed across the Lumion city. Our legends were true. Above them, human ships formed a defensive wall around the planet. Not attacking. Guarding. The Outer Warlord ship slowly began to retreat. Not destroyed, not defeated. Fully. But warned. The ancient predator had met something unexpected. Unity. As the dark fortress jumped back into deep space, the stars became peaceful again, this time different, because the Lumions were no longer alone. Armin looked at the sky. One last time, he had crash-landed as a survivor. He had fought as a soldier. But now, he stood as a bridge between two civilizations. Lyra crossed her arms confidently. Our bond, she said calmly, now connects more than two individuals. Armin nodded. Yeah. Now it connects worlds. Far away in deep space, the Outer Warlord watched human fleet data carefully. He did not fear easily, but he understood one thing now. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had answered. And this time, They were not fighting alone, the end or the beginning.